The wrench slipped from Owen Bailey's hand and clattered against the concrete floor of his apartment. He cursed under his breath, wiping grease from his fingers onto his already stained work pants. The mining drill housing sat in pieces across his small kitchen table, its internal gears spread out like the guts of some mechanical beast. Outside, rain hammered against the thin walls of his unit in the worker district of Dust's End Colony. Owen lived alone in Building 17, third floor, apartment 42. The place smelled like oil and instant meals. His neighbors knew him as the guy who fixed things, who kept to himself, who never complained about the leaking ceiling or the temperamental heating unit. He liked it that way. Simple. Predictable. The knock came during a crack of thunder. Owen paused, holding a gear up to the dim overhead light. Nobody visited at this hour. Nobody visited him at any hour, really. He set down the gear and walked to his door, boots leaving faint prints on the worn floor. The second knock shook the entire door frame. Yeah, hold on. Owen unlocked the 3 bolts he'd installed himself and pulled the door open that a wall of crimson scales filled his doorway. The creature slumped against the frame, massive clawed hands gripping the metal edges hard enough to leave dents. Blood, dark as oil, dripped from dozens of wounds across its body. Wings, tattered and burned, dragged on the ground behind it. The head lifted slowly, revealing amber eyes that burned with pain and something else. Pride, maybe. Or desperation. Sanctuary. The dragon spoke in a voice like grinding stone. The word came out in the old tongue, the formal language that predated human arrival in this sector by thousands of years. I invoke the right of desperate passage. Owen stood there in his doorway, a human barely 6 feet tall, staring up at a creature that had a duck just to fit under the hallway ceiling. Rain poured down behind the dragon, mixing with its blood to form dark puddles on the landing. Most people would have screamed. Most would have slammed the door and called security. Owen Bailey was not most people. "You're dripping on my floor," he said. Then he stepped aside. "Get in before the whole building sees you." The dragon's eyes widened slightly. Confusion crossed its ancient face, but it didn't waste time questioning the offer. It pulled itself through the doorway, scales scraping against the frame. Owen had to help drag its tail inside. The appendage as thick as his torso and just as heavy. He sealed the door and threw all 3 bolts. The dragon collapsed in the middle of his living room, crushing his coffee table and knocking over a lamp. Its breathing came in ragged gasps. Up close, Owen could see the extent of the damage. Burns covered its chest. Deep cuts ran along its flanks. One wing hung an odd angle. "Name's Owen," he said, stepping over a wing to get to his storage closet. "You got a name? Or should I just call you Big Red?" "Wrathful," the dragon managed. Wrathful the Crimson, former sovereign of the Ashenfold Empire, ruler of 40 systems, commander of the Stellar Legions. That's a mouthful. Owen pulled out his emergency medical kit, the heavy-duty one he kept for industrial accidents. "I'm guessing the former part is why you're bleeding in my apartment." Wrathful's laugh came out as a wet cough. "Betrayed during the eclipse ceremony. My own council. They waited until the sacred moment, then struck." Owen knelt beside the dragon's head, opening the med kit. "Sounds like they planned it pretty well. You're lucky you made it this far. Luck is not what brought me to your door, human." Wrathful watched as Owen began cleaning the wounds with industrial antiseptic. The old laws. The codes of sanctuary. I knew this colony still honored them. Most folks don't even remember those laws, Owen said. He worked quickly, his hands steady despite the strangeness of the situation. But yeah, they're still on the books. Anyone who asks for shelter during desperate times, you give it. No questions. Above them, the sound of engines cut through the storm. Hunter ships moving in grid patterns across the colony. Their searchlights swept past Owen's window, casting moving shadows across the walls. Owen kept working, packing the worst wounds with synthetic gel that would clot the bleeding. Wrathful tensed, clearly expecting the human to panic, to reconsider, to throw him out to save himself. Instead, Owen just grabbed a thermal blanket from his closet and draped it over the dragon's damaged wings. "You're safe here," Owen said simply. "Those ships can search all they want. My door's solid, and I've got blackout curtains." You just rest. Wrathful stared at the human with something like wonder in his ancient eyes. In his 1,000 years of rule, none had shown such casual courage, such simple kindness without expectation of reward. Why? Wrathful asked. You risk everything for a stranger, for someone not even your species. Owen shrugged, returning to his work on the dragon's wounds. You knocked. I answered. That's how doors work. Outside, the hunter ships continued their search, unaware that the greatest prize in the sector lay hidden in a mechanic's modest apartment, protected by nothing more than a human's decision to do what felt right. The rain kept falling, and Owen kept working through the night. Sunlight crept through the gaps in Owen's blackout curtains, painting thin lines across the floor. Wrathful woke slowly, his body aching in ways he hadn't felt in centuries. For a moment, he forgot where he was. Then the smell of burning metal and human cooking reached his nostrils, and memory crashed back that he lifted his head carefully. The human, Owen, stood at a small cooking unit, doing something with a pan. The apartment looked even smaller in daylight, packed with tools and spare parts, and the general chaos of someone who worked with their hands. You're awake, Owen said without turning around. Good. Wasn't sure if dragons needed sleep or if he just powered down like old machinery. Wrathful tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through his side. How long? 14 hours, give or take. Owen flipped something in the pan. Your wounds stopped bleeding around hour 6. Whatever that gel does, it works on dragon biology. Lucky guess on my part. The dragon managed to prop himself against the wall, his massive form taking up most of the living room. His mind felt clearer now, though the memories of his fall still burned. The eclipse ceremony, the moment of perfect darkness when the twin suns aligned. His council, beings he'd trusted for decades, moving as one with weapons drawn. They will be searching for me, Wrathful said. The usurpers cannot allow me to live. My very existence challenges their claim. Yeah, figured as much. Owen brought over a large metal tray. On it sat several packages of what looked like frozen protein, thawed and cooked. Not sure what dragons eat, so I grabbed some stuff from the cold storage. It's processed meat, nothing fancy. Wrathful stared at the offering. In his empire, meals were elaborate ceremonies. Servants presented food on precious metals. Every bite was a statement of power and position. Here was a human, offering him factory-processed protein on a dented tray. He ate. It tasted terrible and wonderful at the same time. You commanded 40 systems, Owen said, sitting cross-legged on the floor nearby. That's a lot of territory, a lot of responsibility. It was my birthright, Wrathful replied between bites. My lineage stretches back 10,000 years. The Ashenfold Empire existed before your species learned to build fires. Must have been something ruling all that. Owen didn't sound impressed or intimidated, just curious. Wrathful found himself talking, telling stories he'd never shared with subordinates. The early years of his reign, the wars he'd fought to maintain order, the delicate balance of keeping 40 different species under one banner. He spoke of traditions older than human civilization, of responsibilities that weighed heavier than any crown. Owen listened, occasionally asking questions that showed he actually paid attention. Sounds exhausting, Owen finally said. All that weight on one person. No wonder your council wanted change. Wrathful's eyes flared with anger. They betrayed sacred oaths. They shattered traditions that held our empire together. Maybe Owen stood and started cleaning up. Or maybe they were tired of traditions that didn't work anymore. I don't know. I'm just a mechanic. But from where I'm sitting, ruling through fear and old laws sounds like it was bound to break eventually. And what would you know of leadership? Wrathful demanded, his voice sharp. You, who live alone in this tiny space, who fix machines for others. Owen paused at the sink. I know that when someone knocks on my door bleeding and desperate, I let them in. Don't need a crown to figure that out. The simple statement hit Wrathful harder than any weapon. In his 1,000 years, he'd ruled through power, through tradition, through the weight of his name and the fear his species commanded. This human offered kindness to a stranger because it seemed right. Your species confuses me, Wrathful admitted quietly. In all the imperial records, humans are described as weak, short-lived, physiologically inferior. Yet you risk everything for someone you met hours ago. Yeah, well, your imperial records sound pretty boring. Owen returned to his seat. Everyone's got bad days. Yours just happens to involve more fire and betrayal than most. Doesn't mean you deserve to die in a gutter. Through the window, they could hear the distant sound of announcement drones. Wrathful's keen hearing picked up the words. The Ashenfold Empire's former sovereign was dead, killed during a tragic accident. The new council extended their sympathies to all citizens. Long live the new order. They've declared you dead, Owen said, hearing it too. That's either really good or really bad for us. They're lying to maintain stability, Wrathful explained. But they'll keep searching. They need proof of my death. A body. Otherwise, the old loyalists might rally. Owen nodded slowly. So we keep you hidden until you're healed. Then what? Then I reclaim what is mine. Wrathful's voice carried the weight of certainty. I will return to the imperial seat and take back my throne. With what army? Owen asked practically. You're one dragon. They've got 40 systems worth of forces. Wrathful had no answer to that. In his mind, he'd always had power. Always had armies. Always had the weight of tradition backing his rule. The idea of being truly alone, truly powerless, was foreign and terrifying. I don't know, he finally admitted, the words bitter on his tongue. Owen stood and stretched. Well, first things first. Let's get you actually healthy. Hard to reclaim anything when you can barely stand. I'm about to head to work, but I'll bring back more supplies. You stay quiet, stay hidden. My neighbors are nosy, but not suicidal. As Owen prepared to leave, Wrathful found himself asking, why do you help me? Truly. Owen stopped at the door, considering the question. Because you knocked. Because you needed help. Because that's what decent people do, even when it's hard. Maybe especially when it's hard. The door closed behind him, leaving Wrathful alone with his thoughts and the strange, uncomfortable realization that this human's simple morality might be stronger than any empire. The fourth day brought complications in the form of Margaret from apartment 38. Owen had just returned from his shift at the repair depot, arms full of food containers and medical supplies, when he found her waiting by his door. Margaret was 70-something, sharp-eyed, and made it her business to know everyone's business in Building 17. Owen Bailey, she said, arms crossed. You've been buying enough food for 3 people. Your lights are on at odd hours. And I heard something large moving around in there 2 nights ago. Owen shifted the bags in his arms. Got a project. Big one. Needs a lot of attention. Margaret's eyes narrowed. You're not in trouble, are you? Because if you need help, you just ask. We look after our own here. The irony wasn't lost on Owen. I'm good, Margaret. Promise. Just busy. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. You're a good boy, Owen. Too good sometimes. Just remember, there's looking after others, and there's getting yourself killed. Know the difference. After she left, Owen entered his apartment to find Wrathful pressed against the wall, making himself as small as a 15-foot dragon could manage. She knows, Wrathful hissed. She suspects. Different thing. Owen set down the supplies. Margaret's nosy, but she's also spent 40 years in this colony. She understands the sanctuary laws better than most. Over the following days, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Owen worked his shifts, returning each evening with supplies and stories from the repair depot. Wrathful healed slowly, his body mending in ways that fascinated Owen's mechanical mind. They talked. Long conversations that stretched into the night. Wrathful spoke of his empire's history. The great wars that forged 40 systems into one unified territory. The careful balance of power between species. The weight of being the living symbol of stability for billions of beings. Owen shared human history in return. Earth's bloody past. The colony wars. Humanity's stubborn refusal to stay dead despite having none of the natural advantages other species possessed. No scales, no natural weapons, no extended lifespans. Just adaptability and a tendency to help each other when things got bad. Your species has no empire, Wrathful observed one evening. No central authority governing all human worlds. How do you maintain order? Owen laughed. We don't. Not really. Each colony pretty much does its own thing. There are agreements, trade deals, mutual defense pacts. But no emperor sitting on a throne telling everyone what to do. That sounds like chaos. It is, but it's also freedom. When one group makes bad choices, the others can choose differently. When one colony fails, others learn from it. It's messy, but it works. Wrathful considered this. In his empire, order flowed from the top. His word was law across 40 systems. Efficient, stable. Yet that same structure had allowed his council to remove him in a single night. The patrol came on the 7th day. Owen was at work when his communicator buzzed with an emergency colony-wide alert. Imperial forces were conducting door-to-door searches in the worker districts. All residents were to cooperate fully. Anyone harboring fugitives would face severe consequences that he ran the entire way home. The patrol had already reached Building 17 by the time he arrived. 2 Imperial guards stood in the hallway outside his door, their weapons humming with charge. Margaret stood between them and Owen's apartment, arguing loudly about proper search procedures and colony rights. Owen works night shifts, she was saying. You can't just break into a working man's home without cause. We have authority from the new council, one guard replied. Step aside, citizen. Owen pushed through the small crowd that had gathered. I'm here. This is my place. What's the problem? The guards turned to him. We're searching all units in this sector. Open your door. Owen's heart hammered, but he kept his face neutral. You got a specific warrant? Or is this one of those everyone's guilty until proven otherwise situations? Open the door, or we'll open it for you. Margaret moved beside Owen. The boy's got rights. You want in, you get proper authorization from Administrator Helms, not some blanket order from Offworld. Other neighbors had emerged now. Old Rick from 45, the young couple from 39, the maintenance worker who lived on the first floor. They formed a loose group around Owen and the guards, not threatening, but present. The guards looked at each other uncertainly. They had authority, but colonies were tricky. Pushed too hard, and workers got stubborn. Word spread. Production slowed. Their superiors hated complications. We'll return with proper documentation, one guard finally said. Don't leave the colony, citizen. After they left, Margaret patted Owen's shoulder. You've got about 4 hours before they come back with paperwork. Whatever you're hiding in there, you better figure out what you're going to do about it. Inside, Wrathful had squeezed himself into the false wall Owen had built years ago to hide valuables from the occasional theft. The space was cramped even for storage, let alone a dragon. They'll come back, Owen said, helping Wrathful out, with legal documents and probably more guards. I can't stop them then. Wrathful's eyes burned with frustration and shame. I've brought danger to you, to your neighbors. I should leave. And go where? You can barely fly with that wing. They'll shoot you down before you clear the colony. Then what do you suggest? Owen paced the small apartment, thinking. Margaret said 4 hours. The administrator's office closes in 3. If we can convince Helms not to sign off on the search warrant until tomorrow, that gives us tonight to figure something out. One human administrator won't refuse Imperial guards. You'd be surprised what colony administrators will do when their workers ask nicely. Owen grabbed his communicator. Margaret? Yeah, it's Owen. I need a favor. A big one. Within an hour, half the building had signed a petition demanding the administrator follow proper legal procedures. By hour 2, workers from other buildings had joined. By hour 3, Administrator Helms was facing a choice between angry Imperial guards and angry colonists who kept the mining operations running. Helms chose the colonists. The search warrant was delayed pending proper review. That night, Wrathful stood by the window, looking out at the colony. Humans moved below, ordinary people living ordinary lives. Yet they'd stood up to Imperial authority for a stranger they'd never met, just because one of their own asked them to. I've ruled for 1,000 years, Wrathful said quietly. Commanded armies, held the fate of billions in my claws. Yet I've never seen loyalty like this. Given freely, without expectation of reward. Owen joined him at the window. That's because you were looking at it wrong. Loyalty you demand isn't really loyalty. It's just obedience. This is people choosing to do right by each other. That's stronger than any empire. For the first time since his fall, Wrathful began to wonder if reclaiming his throne was truly what he wanted. The emergency colony meeting was called for the following evening. Owen sat in the back of the community hall, trying to look invisible while Administrator Helms addressed the gathered colonists. Wrathful remained hidden in the apartment, listening through Owen's communicator on a private channel. The Imperial forces have made their position clear, Helms said, his voice tired. They have evidence that the former sovereign Wrathful may be hiding in our colony. They're demanding full cooperation, including unrestricted searches of all residential and commercial areas. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Dust's End was a mining colony, far from the centers of galactic power. Most people here had come to escape politics, not dive into them. If we refuse, Helms continued, they've threatened to blockade our supply routes. No food shipments, no medical supplies, no equipment parts. We last maybe 3 months before things got desperate. Margaret stood up from the front row. And if we cooperate, if we hand over whoever they're looking for, then life continues as normal. The Empire leaves us alone. Except for the part where we all know we sold out someone who asked for sanctuary, Margaret said loudly. The part where we throw away laws that kept this colony decent for 50 years. That part sound normal to you, Helms? The administrator rubbed his face. Margaret, I understand the principle, but we're talking about people's lives here. Children, families. I can't sacrifice the whole colony for one fugitive. Owen felt his heart sink. The math was simple. One life against thousands. Any reasonable person would make the trade. He started to stand, ready to turn himself in along with Wrathful, when a voice called out from the middle of the crowd. What if it's not just one life? An older miner named David stood, his work-worn hands gripping his hat. My granddaughter got sick last year. Rare condition. The colony medical system couldn't handle it. I sent messages to every hospital in the sector. Only one responded. The Ashenfold Imperial Medical Institute. They sent doctors, equipment, everything. Save her life. Wouldn't take payment, just said it was their duty. David looked around the room. That medical program was founded by Wrathful himself 300 years ago. Said every being deserved care, regardless of ability to pay. The new council shut it down last week. Too expensive, they said. Not profitable. Another colonist stood. The trade routes that bring our supplies? Those were established during Wrathful's reign. He forced the merchant guilds to serve frontier colonies at fair prices. The new council's already renegotiating those deals. Prices are going up. More voices joined in. Stories of imperial programs that had helped colonies like theirs. Educational initiatives. Infrastructure projects. Fair labor laws. All created during Wrathful's rule, many now being dismantled by the new council. They're calling him a tyrant, Margaret said. But tyranny is funny. Sometimes it looks different depending on where you're standing. From here, the old rule looked a lot better than what's coming. Helms held up his hands. Even so, we can't fight the entire Imperial fleet. We're miners, not soldiers. Nobody's talking about fighting. Owen said, finally standing. All eyes turned to him. We're talking about doing what's right. About honoring laws that have protected people in desperate situations for generations. If we throw that away because it's convenient, what are we? Dead, someone called out. We be dead. Starved out in 3 months. Maybe, Owen admitted. Or maybe other colonies join us. Maybe the frontier worlds that benefited from Wrathful's policies decide they don't want the new council either. Maybe we're not as alone as we think. That's a lot of maybes, Helms said. Sure is. But I know one thing for certain. If we sell out someone who asked for sanctuary, who followed our own laws, then we're not the colony I thought we were. We're just another place where power wins and decency loses. The hall fell silent. Owen could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him. He wasn't a leader, wasn't a politician, just a mechanic who'd answered his door when someone knocked. Margaret stood again. I vote we tell the Imperial forces to shove their demands. We protect our own, and right now, that includes whoever asked us for help. Second, David called. Third, another voice added. Helms looked around the room, seeing the determination on faces young and old. You understand what this means? Real hardship, possible violence. This isn't just words. We've been through hard times before, Margaret said. We'll get through them again. Together. The vote wasn't unanimous. Some argued for practicality, for survival over principle. But when Helms counted hands, the majority chose sanctuary. Back in his apartment, Wrathful listened through the communicator, his ancient heart hammering. An entire colony of beings he'd considered lesser, primitive, short-lived, had chosen danger over safety for him. Not because he was their sovereign, not because he commanded them, but because they believed it was right. When Owen returned home, he found the dragon standing in the middle of the room, head bowed. "Your people have decided to protect me," Wrathful said quietly. "At great cost to themselves." "Yeah, they did." "Why?" "I'm nothing to them. Just another alien who ruled from far away." Owen set down his bag. "You're someone who asked for help. That's enough." Wrathful lifted his head, his eyes blazing with emotion. "I ruled for 1,000 years and never understood this. This strength your species has. Not power, not technology, just the will to do right even when it's hard. We're not special," Owen said. "We just figured out that the only way to survive in a universe that doesn't care about us is to care about each other, even when it costs. I will not let them suffer for me," Wrathful declared, his voice resonating with old authority. "If the Imperial forces come, I will stand with your people. I will fight beside them as an equal, not a king hiding behind subjects." Owen smiled. "Good, because they're going to need all the help they can get." Helms just got word. The blockade fleet arrives in 2 days. Outside, the colony began to prepare. Not for surrender, but for resistance. Miners gathered equipment that could be repurposed as weapons. Engineers mapped defensive positions in the tunnel systems. Families stockpiled supplies. And in apartment 42 of Building 17, a dethroned Dragon King learned what it truly meant to earn loyalty rather than demand it. The Imperial fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel just before dawn. 12 warships, enough firepower to level the entire colony in minutes. They took up positions in orbit, weapons trained on the settlement below. Owen stood on the roof of Building 17 with Wrathful, watching the ships blot out the stars. Around them, the colony had transformed. Mining equipment had been repositioned to create defensive barriers. Tunnel entrances had been fortified. Every able-bodied person had a role in the plan they'd spent 2 days creating. "They won't negotiate," Wrathful said. "The Usurper Council can't afford to look weak. They'll demand my surrender, and when refused, they'll attack. Let them come." Owen checked the charge on the mining laser he'd modified into something more dangerous. "We've got home advantage. They don't know these tunnels like we do. You're talking about guerrilla warfare against a professional military. Your people will die. Probably. But they chose this. You don't get to take that choice away from them now." The communication came an hour later. Admiral Torvin, commanding the fleet, his voice broadcast across every speaker in the colony. "Citizens of Dust's End, you are harboring a fugitive wanted by the legitimate government of the Ashenfold Empire. Surrender Wrathful immediately, and no action will be taken against your colony. You have 2 hours to comply." Administrator Helms responded from the colony command center. "Admiral, we recognize no authority over sanctuary laws." Wrathful invoked his right to desperate passage. "Our laws, established long before the new council existed, protect him. Your laws mean nothing against imperial decree. One final warning. Surrender the fugitive or face the consequences." Margaret's voice cut in, broadcast from the mining office. "Here's a warning for you, Admiral. We've rigged the primary fusion reactor. You attack us, it goes critical. Takes out your ships along with the colony. Mutuellement assure de destruction. So maybe you want to think real careful about what happens next." Owen winced. It was a bluff. They hadn't actually rigged the reactor, just made it look like they had any scans the fleet might run. But it was a dangerous gamble. Silence stretched for long minutes. Then Torvin's voice returned, colder now. "You're making a mistake you won't survive." The first strike hit the southern mining complex. Energy beams from orbit, precise and devastating. The complex exploded in a fireball that lit up the morning sky. Everyone to the tunnels. Helm shouted over the emergency channels. Defensive positions now. The colonists moved like they'd practiced, streaming into the underground network they knew better than anyone. Owen and Wrathful headed for the main access point, where David and a group of miners had set up what they were generously calling a firing position. "They're landing troops," David reported, pointing to 6 dropships descending from the fleet. "Looks like they're going for a ground assault instead of just bombing us flat. They want Wrathful alive," Owen realized. "Dead, he's just a martyr. Alive, they can make an example of him." Wrathful's eyes blazed. "Then they'll be disappointed." The dragon moved before Owen could stop him, launching himself into the open air with powerful wing strokes. His damaged wing barely held, but he climbed anyway, roaring a challenge that echoed across the colony. The dropships immediately changed course, weapons locking onto him. Energy fire lit up the sky as they opened up with everything they had. Wrathful dodged, weaved, his aerial combat experience showing despite his injuries. He led them away from the colony, over the barren wasteland beyond the settlement. "He's protecting us," Margaret breathed, watching from the tunnel entrance. Drawing them off and getting himself killed, Owen snapped. He grabbed his modified laser and a rappelling kit. "I need 3 people who aren't afraid of heights." 5 minutes later, Owen and 3 miners were climbing the outside of Building 17's antenna array. Wrathful was still airborne, but barely. Blood streamed from new wounds. 1 dropship had landed, deploying soldiers who were setting up heavy weapons to bring him down. "On my mark," Owen said, sighting along his laser. "We take out their power supply." 4 beams lanced out simultaneously, striking the soldiers' equipment. Generators exploded. Weapons went dead. The soldiers scattered, trying to locate where the fire came from. Wrathful used the distraction to dive, slamming into the grounded dropship with his full weight. Metal shrieked. The ship's engine died. Soldiers scrambled to escape as the dragon tore through their position. But there were still 5 more dropships, and Wrathful was slowing. He couldn't keep this up. That's when the tunnels came alive. Colonists emerged from hidden exits all across the landing zone. They'd spent 50 years mining this rock, knew every crack and crevice. They came up behind the Imperial forces, using mining charges and improvised weapons to create chaos. "For Dust's End," David roared, detonating a charge that collapsed an entire section where soldiers had taken cover. The Imperial forces found themselves fighting an enemy that disappeared into the ground and reappeared somewhere else. Every time they established a position, colonists would tunnel underneath and attack from a new angle. The professional soldiers were trained for conventional warfare, not this kind of desperate, creative resistance. Admiral Torvin, watching from orbit, made a decision. If ground forces couldn't handle it, he'd use orbital bombardment. Precise strikes on the tunnel entrances. Collapse the whole network and bury the colonists alive, the targeting systems locked on, weapons charged. And then 3 more ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Not Imperial vessels, colony ships from neighboring systems. Behind them came more. 12, 2 dozen. Frontier colonies that had heard what Dust's End was doing and decided they were tired of the new council too. Admiral Torvin. Came a transmission from the lead ship. "This is Captain Richards of the Frontier Coalition. You will cease fire immediately and withdraw from this system." "You have no authority here," Torvin replied. "We have 37 ships that disagree." "Your move, Admiral." Torvin stared at his displays. 37 ships, mostly civilian, converted cargo haulers and mining vessels, but armed enough to make a fight messy. And behind them, more signals were appearing. More colonies joining. He'd come to make an example. Instead, he'd started a rebellion. "All forces withdraw," Torvin ordered. "Return to fleet." On the ground, Wrathful collapsed near Owen, his body finally giving out from exhaustion and injury. Owen rushed to his side as colonists emerged from the tunnels, cheering at the sight of the Imperial ships retreating. "We won," Owen said, hardly believing it that Wrathful's eyes found his. "No, you won. Your people, their courage, their refusal to accept injustice." He coughed, blood flecking his lips. "I merely witnessed it." Human medics rushed over, the same people who'd worked the Colony Medical Center for years. They examined Wrathful with professional efficiency, ignoring the fact that their patient was a 15-foot dragon. "He's hurt bad," one medic reported, "but we can stabilize him. Get him to the medical bay." As they worked, Margaret appeared beside Owen. That was the stupidest, most beautiful thing I've ever seen. A whole colony choosing right over easy. Owen watched the Imperial fleet jump away, then looked at the ships from other colonies still arriving. "Something tells me this isn't over. We just kicked off something bigger." "Good," Margaret said. "About time someone did." 3 weeks after the battle, Owen sat on the roof of Building 17, watching the sunset paint the colony in shades of orange and red. The place looked different now. Repair crews were still fixing the damage from the Imperial attack, but there was energy to the work. Purpose. Footsteps on the access ladder announced Wrathful's arrival. The dragon moved carefully, still healing but much stronger. He settled beside Owen, his massive form somehow fitting into the space like it belonged there. "The medical staff says I can fly again," Wrathful said. "My wing has healed enough." "That's good. You've been cooped up in my apartment too long." Owen took a drink from his canteen, probably getting sick of the view. "Actually, I find I've grown fond of it." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Below them, the colony bustled with activity. More ships had arrived, not just from neighboring colonies, but from across the frontier. Word had spread about Dust's End stand. Some came offering supplies. Others came seeking sanctuary of their own. The colony that had wanted to be left alone had become a symbol. "I could return to the Empire," Wrathful said quietly. "The frontier colonies have offered their support. With them behind me, I could challenge the Usurper Council. Reclaim my throne." "You could," Owen agreed. "They expect me to lead them, to become their sovereign, to restore the old ways." "Do you want that?" Wrathful considered the question. A month ago, the answer would have been immediate, automatic. Of course, he wanted his throne, his power, his rightful place. But a month ago, he hadn't lived in a cramped apartment with a human mechanic, hadn't seen what real loyalty looked like, hadn't fought beside people who chose to do right instead of what was easy. "I ruled for 1,000 years, Wrathful said. "I thought I understood leadership, authority, the weight of the crown. But I ruled through tradition and power. People obeyed because they had to, not because they wanted to. And now I've seen what happens when people choose to follow, when they act from conviction instead of compulsion. It's messy, harder to control, but it's stronger than anything I built in my empire." Owen nodded. "So what are you going to do?" "The frontier colonies need guidance. Not a sovereign, not an emperor, but someone who can help them organize, coordinate. Someone who knows how empires work and how to resist them. Like an ambassador," Owen suggested. "Yes, exactly that." Wrathful looked down at the colony. "I can help them build something new. Not an empire ruled from above, but a coalition of free worlds working together. It will be difficult, frustrating, nothing like the clear authority I once had." "Sounds like you've made up your mind." "I have. On one condition." Wrathful turned to Owen. "This place, this colony, needs someone who understands them, someone they trust. I'm asking you to work with me. Help me bridge the gap between old Imperial knowledge and new human thinking." Owen laughed. "I'm a mechanic. I fix mining equipment. You're someone who opened his door when a desperate stranger knocked, who convinced an entire colony to choose principle over safety, who shot at Imperial soldiers from a rooftop to protect someone he barely knew. That's not just a mechanic. When you put it that way, I sound almost heroic. You are. You just don't see it." Before Owen could respond, his communicator buzzed. Margaret's voice crackled through. "Owen, you up there with our dragon friend? Got someone at the colony entrance asking for sanctuary. Another fugitive from the Empire. Figured you'd want to know." Owen and Wrathful exchanged glances. "On our way," Owen said. They made their way down through the building, past neighbors who nodded in greeting, past apartments where families were settling in for the evening. The colony had changed, but it was still home to AT, the main entrance. They found a being Owen had never seen before. Four-armed, covered in iridescent scales, clearly injured from a recent fight. The being knelt in the dust, following the old protocols for seeking sanctuary. I invoke desperate passage. The being said in accented but clear human common. The new council seeks my life. I ask shelter until I can safely depart. Administrator Helms stood nearby, looking at Owen and wrathful. Well, what do we do? Owen stepped forward. We follow our laws. We grant sanctuary. The being looked up, gratitude and relief flooding their features. Thank you. I'm called Celine. I was a judge in the Imperial Court. I opposed the coup. They want me silent. You're safe here, Owen said, helping Celine to their feet. We've got medical care, food, shelter, everything you need. As they led Celine toward the medical center, more beings emerged from the shadows. A family of small, furry creatures. A tall, thin being with crystalline skin. A young dragon, much smaller than Wrathful. All seeking sanctuary. All fleeing the new council. This is going to become regular, isn't it? Owen said to Wrathful. It appears so. The frontier colonies are becoming a refuge for anyone who won't accept the new order. We're not just resisting an empire. We're building an alternative to it. Margaret appeared, surveying the growing group of refugees. We're going to need more housing, more supplies, more everything. Then we'll build it, Owen said simply. Same as we always do. Over the following weeks, the pattern continued. More refugees arrived. More colonies joined the coalition. The frontier, once dismissed as insignificant, became a force the empire couldn't ignore. Wrathful took up his new role as ambassador and coordinator, helping the diverse colonies work together despite their differences. He brought imperial knowledge, diplomatic experience, and a deep understanding of how power structures worked. But he brought something else too. Humility. The willingness to listen to humans and other species he once considered beneath him. Owen continued his work at the repair depot, but now he also served as a liaison between Wrathful and the colony. He helped translate imperial customs into terms frontier people could understand, helped refugees adjust to a society built on cooperation instead of hierarchy. Months passed. Then a year. The frontier coalition grew stronger. The Imperial Council grew frustrated. Eventually, they would have to address the growing rebellion properly. But that was a problem for another day. For now, Owen sat on his roof with Wrathful, watching another sunset. Do you regret it? Owen asked. Giving up your throne? Your empire? Wrathful was quiet for a long moment. I had power for 1,000 years. Real power. The kind that makes worlds tremble. But I never had this. This, purpose. True purpose. Not ruling because tradition demands it, but serving because it's right. Not commanding loyalty, but earning it. He looked at Owen. You gave me that when you opened your door. You showed me what strength really means. I just did what any decent person would do. Exactly. And that's what makes you extraordinary. You think decency is ordinary. That kindness is simple. But in a universe of empires and hierarchies and power, choosing to help someone for no reason except it's right, that's revolutionary. A ship descended toward the colony landing pad. Another group of refugees, probably. More beings seeking a place where they could live free from imperial control. Someone should greet them, Owen said, standing. Someone should, Wrathful agreed, rising as well. They made their way down through the building, through the colony that had become so much more than either of them expected. When they reached the landing pad, they found a young couple with 2 children, all looking exhausted and frightened. We heard about this place, the father said, about a colony that protects people, that stands up for what's right. We're hoping there's room for us. Owen smiled, extending his hand. There's always room. Welcome to Dust's End. As he helped the family with their belongings, he thought about that night weeks ago when a desperate dragon had knocked on his door. How a simple decision to help had changed everything. The door had never been locked. It never needed to be, because some things were more important than safety. Some principles were worth defending, no matter the cost. And sometimes, the strongest thing you could do was open your door to someone in need and say simply, "You're safe here." That was the human way, not through superior technology or greater power, but through the stubborn refusal to abandon each other, even when it would be easier. Especially when it would be easier. And as more beings arrived seeking sanctuary, as the coalition grew stronger, Owen understood that what had started with one dragon and one mechanic had become something much larger. A movement, a rebellion, a new way of thinking about power and community. All because someone had knocked and someone else had answered, the way it was always meant to be,